I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is from separation to unity, a shift of paradigm that will transform our experience of being human. So it should be a very interesting conversation. But before we get started, let's take a moment to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, energizing all your molecules, all your electrons, all your cells, and creating this brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's gently press our palms together and softly, softly, softly rub your fingers against your palms to feel the deliciousness of that sensation and how miraculous it is to have these physical forms through which we experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's great to be here with you as always. So deeply appreciated. And today we're talking about moving from a paradigm of separation to one of unity. I think I said oneness earlier, but I would like to correct that to say unity, because I'm not talking about moving into a place of homogenization to the point where we don't have our individual expression. Unity is where there are multiples that unite versus oneness where it's indivisible. And again, I just want to mention that I am not seeing comments. I'm checking to make sure that we're live. Let me just see if we are. And we are live. So I just want you to know that if you're not getting a response to your comment, it's because I'm not seeing it. So just a heads up about that. So when we talk about moving from separation to unity, what does that mean? I think first what we get to do is to notice, take note, recognize how we exist in a paradigm of separation. And part of that paradigm is opposition, by default. As we're separate, there are, we create this sense of opposition and competition just by our very nature. By identifying ourselves as individual beings, there is this predisposition certainly to be identifying ourselves as separate from one another, right? And indeed, in many ways we are separate, and in other ways we are all very, very intimately connected. And our culture has been primarily focused and has optimized this notion of separation. And as a result of that, we experience a greater sense of fear and a greater sense of self-defense, need for self-defense. The notion of separation and opposition and othering, is the source of tremendous pain and paranoia and fear and disruption. So we get to take a look at how pervasive and insidious this notion of separation is, how deep it really goes. When we look at, and by the way, I'll just say again, I'm not seeing any comments, which is why I'm not responding to anything. So if you're making comments, I know that sometimes people have logged out and logged back into Facebook, and then their comments were visible. But meantime, it's not stopping me from having this conversation with you. So when we look at this notion of separation and how it impacts us individually, one of the really profound ways that we are impacted is our tendency to compare ourselves to others. So we look at somebody else and we say, wow, I'm taller, I'm shorter, I'm fatter, I'm thinner, I'm smarter, I'm less intelligent, like whatever these things are, I'm attractive, I'm less attractive, whatever it is, we're comparing ourselves to others and evaluating our own worth and merit based on these comparisons. And when we come from a place of wholeness and connectedness, we recognize that we are part of a whole, and that each of us is reflecting that whole. So when we connect with other people, they're a part of us, and that there's this unity. And the distinction between unity and oneness is maybe an arbitrary one. Here's a comment from Gia. Good morning, good morning. Great to have you with us again. So now I know that comments are working. Thank you, Gia, I appreciate that. So we're talking about this shift of paradigm from separation to unity. And it's such a fundamental shift in our beingness that's available that will transform everything on the planet. When we connect ourselves, when we feel connected, there is a greater sense of responsibility, I would think. Like when I feel connected to you, then the impact that my actions have on you impacts me, right? So, for instance, if we look at corporations who feel that they can pollute with impunity because it is just a consequence of trying to increase their bottom line, if there were this sense of connectedness and unity, then if they recognize that what they were doing was impacting parts of themselves, that the consequences that they were producing in other communities actually impacted them, then there might be other choices that would be made. Another part of this, and I've spoken about it before, but another part of this dynamic of separation is, hello, good morning, Dennis. So good to have you here with us. You're so, I say it every morning, but you're so funny. Thank you. So when we look at this notion of separation, we're always doing comparison. And what happens is that there's a separation from ourselves. And in our separation from ourselves, we look for external validation of who we are and what our worth is. And ways that we look for that external validation are the clothes we wear, the image we have, the yoga we do, the, like I meditate more than you do, or the things we own, the people we know, the degrees and certifications and credentials that we have. So all these things are things that we externalize ourselves into as ways of validating our existence. So I know I've talked with you guys about this before, but this is also about having an inner wholeness, having a sense of sufficiency. And these two, this unity versus separation, and this sense of sufficiency, like that we deserve to be here just because we are. A squirrel doesn't wonder, well, have I collected enough nuts to deserve to be here? What's my contribution? The squirrel just is. And we have, we deserve to be here just by virtue of the fact that we're alive. I mean, you could look at the fact that we won a massive lottery just by virtue of the fact that, the reproductive cycle is one that eliminates all kinds of contenders, right? And here we are, we made it, right? So we're part of this bigger picture. And when we can shift the paradigm from isolation to connection, then there's all kinds of shifts that will happen in the way that we live, the way that we be. I was driving the other day, and there was this woman who was behind me. She had shifted, I was in the right lane. She had shifted from she was honking her horn at the person in front of her in the left lane, and then she swerved into the right lane, and she's behind me, and she's making all kinds of gestures and honking her horn, and she was seeing opposition, she was seeing obstruction. So we were talking about reconciliation yesterday, and reconciling, and part of that conversation is on a higher level, is coming to harmony. And so had this person behind me driving been able to be connected, she would not have been seeing the opposition that I was presenting by being in front of her, with not going at the speed that she wanted me to be going. So Gia says, connection is something we're always looking for, as far as I have observed, Mira, be it with people, family, nature, our pets, everything, I mean. And, I think, Gia, that that's the case. So many of us feel deeply isolated and are yearning for connection with the world, with nature, with other humans. And I think what I'm getting at for today is that sense of unity and connection begins as an internal experience. And this notion of sufficiency is a part of that notion, is a part of that paradigm shift, but also to recognize that every human on this planet, every living creature on this planet, every experience on the planet is a reflection of ourselves. So if we can, good morning, Elaine. So good to have you here with us. We're talking about a paradigm shift from separation to unity. So if we are able to, when we are able to recognize the world that we perceive as an extension and projection and part of ourselves, that, everything we're perceiving is an aspect of our beingness, what happens is that we expand into a different state of awareness and a different relationship. So we get to cultivate that connectedness. It doesn't come from outside in as much as it comes from inside out. And really, truly, our experience of the world comes from inside out. Our experience of other people, our experience of circumstances, it all comes from the inside out, from our perception, from our state of consciousness. And so, in discussing this movement from separation to unity, what we're looking to do is to create that broader acceptance and integration with all things. So I can't really have this conversation with you. I mean, we've had this conversation a couple times at least, but I can't really have this conversation with you without going into the Ho'oponopono prayer, which is really coming from a space of unity and responsibility, meaning that we are the creators of our world. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. Elaine says, when one is ready to remember who they really are from within, the illusion of separation will dissolve. The illusion of separation will dissolve. The conditioned mind will fade. And I agree with you 100%, Elaine. That's really what we're talking about today. I think we get to put conscious attention on this notion of unity, of the world being a reflection of ourselves, that when we experience interaction with other people, that on some level it is an interaction with an aspect of our own being. And as we can deepen our connection, we deepen our love and appreciation, and that gets communicated. And what happens is that projection is reflected back to us. It always is projected back to us. And as we experience greater unity, that too is experienced back to us or expressed back to us. Rosalind says, oh, I love this. Good morning, Rosalind. So good to have you here with us. Rosalind says, good morning, core connectors, falling apart to come together. Yes, indeed, because what we are doing is we're disassembling our notion of ourselves as isolated beings. What we get to do is to move into this sense of being connected. Like with bees, they have a hive mind, and each of them has their individual function, and yet they have this collective awareness, this collective mission, I guess you might even say. And I'm not saying that all of us are going to be believing the same thing or acting in the same way, but we are part of a collective. Elaine says, I no longer seek outside myself. And my guess is, as far as that goes, Elaine, that it's all ourselves, right? Like all of it is myself. Because myself is myself with big S word, capital self, sorry, capital S self, um, is really not in any way bounded by my physical form. That, you know, if we recognize that we are part of a greater consciousness, that we are all part of an expression of life, that life is flowing through us, and that we are life happening. If we can recognize that life is what unifies us, then, you know, we are like the bees in a hive, being life collectively, right? Or along with the bees in a hive. So good morning, Isabel. So good to have you joining us. And Elaine says, when one has suffered enough, one becomes willing to let go and be free. And so I love that you said that, Elaine. It makes me think of the saying, pain is, we will experience pain, but suffering is optional. So suffering comes from the resistance, you know, and where we stop being free is where we start resisting the world as it exists, as it is. And separation is part of that. So Gia says, thank you choosing to talk on this, Mira. When I feel anxious, I think that's the time I feel craving for connection with myself, right? Feeling anxious is disconnection, right? It's creating, it's based in this otherness, because what do we get anxious about? We get anxious about externalities that are fearful for us, you know, or we create these resistances and separation from the bigger whole somehow. So to go on with Gia says, and when I trust myself, it feels better, even while feeling those heavy emotions. So I totally connect with that, Gia. And what we can recognize is that when we're trusting ourselves, we're also trusting, on another level, we're trusting the world. And the more we can, like, trust the universe, trust our beingness within that universe, trust our being the universe in its own way, then those heavy feelings and the anxiety can lighten and lift. And so Gia says, wow, thank you for putting it this way. Myself is myself means how it's me asking or getting in touch with other physical body, but it's my extension. Exactly. So the capital S self, when we connect to that, it's unbounded, right? The capital S self is our core beingness, and it's unbounded. And if it's unbounded, it incorporates everything else that exists. And when we incorporate everything else that exists, we're moving into a space of unity and a whole different paradigm of being from that place of unity. I mean, we can look at our very own Elaine Leonard here, our brilliant unicorn, who lives in that space of connection and unity, and not looking outside of self, because self encompasses all. So maybe paradoxical, but maybe just like we were talking yesterday about the paradox in the word reconcile, that it's paradoxical and not. On some level it's paradoxical, on another level it's transformational, to recognize that what we think of as self on the general plane of existence is an isolated, individuated being. You know, the idea we'll die alone, And then we can elevate that to the next quantum level where where self is all of it. And then there's no death even. Like not only do we not die alone, but there's not even any death. So, and so Elaine says, yes, there is only one. So maybe it's from separation to oneness. Maybe it's separation to unity. I'm going to backtrack on what I said earlier. So, and Isabel says, I went to your website and checked out the program. It sounds amazing, but can't afford it at the moment. Muji teaches that we keep looking inside what is all along within. I love the way you explain. Thank you. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you so much. I have to say, I appreciate that you went to the website and checked out the program. And I can tell you that pretty much everybody that has considered doing it and everybody that has chosen to do it, with maybe one exception, all had a money issue around it, all had a concern about the financial end of it. And I can tell you with certainty, well, I've had people that absolutely couldn't afford it do the program, and couldn't afford it was by their own determination. And I think what they realized is they couldn't afford not to, because of the change and the transformation that took place as a result. So what I would invite you to is, if you're open to finding a way, potentially, DM me, and I will be happy to give you a session so that you have an experience of it. And then there's an opportunity to reassess whether it's possible, because, everybody has financial considerations. Pretty much most of the people that I've met have financial considerations. And the question is, what's available to you? When you get in tune with what might be possible, then it's a whole different conversation. It's like, I think that what's available is priceless and life-changing. So anyway, reach out to me. So Dennis says, beauty begins the moment you decide to be yourself. That's beautiful, Dennis. I've never heard that, and I love it. I love it. And I think that decision to be ourselves is something that we revisit and revisit and revisit, until almost until the self disappears. Another paradox for us, right? That we get to be ourselves, and as we become more and more ourselves, we become less and less attached to any particular specific identity. So Elaine says, the more you trust yourself with honor and respect, as through the unfolding process, this will reflect outward, and one will experience this trust, honor, and respect for all. Beautiful, beautiful. I agree, Elaine, that the deeper we go within ourselves, the more we trust ourselves, the more we're trusting life. We might trust life and bring that into self-trust. We might have self-trust and bring it into trusting life. Doesn't matter which way we get there, but the more we move into that space of trust, the more we have the capacity to expand our beingness and expand our experience of life. And this, I really do believe, just to circle back and put a bow on all this. This is so funny. Okay, so Elaine says, I don't see myself as a unicorn. I wouldn't expect you to, Elaine. Maybe this is you, love, as I don't hold labels. That's why I'm sure you wouldn't see yourself as a unicorn. And when I say I see you as a unicorn, what I mean by that is that you're from what I gather through what you've conveyed, your experience of life is very rare. You know, that you're living life from a place of presence that most of us have not attained. So that's what I mean. I mean it in the most complimentary way, and I'm not trying to impose it upon you as a label. So Elaine says, just playing, with all kinds of laughing faces. So just to clarify, and Gia says, is it that, Mira, when we start to become, we don't get divided into good, bad, dark, and light. As I recently read about Jesus, he lived in oneness, so physical pain couldn't stop him, something like that. What do you think? That we are all of it, Gia. I mean, ultimately, we are all of it. So I mentioned earlier the Ho'oponopono prayer. I just have to check to make sure I don't have an appointment. Sorry, guys. The Ho'oponopono prayer, Ho'oponopono prayer is, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. And so if we look at that, that means the first thing is, I'm sorry. What am I sorry for? Whatever the circumstance is. You know, I'm taking responsibility. We can do that for world issues. You know, we can do that for altercations with other humans. We can do that for our impact on nature. You know, because what the I'm sorry is creating this connection to say, I'm responsible. I'm responsible. So the lore behind it is, whether, I don't know if it's true or urban legend kind of thing, but the story behind it is that there was I guess he was a psychologist, criminal psychologist, whatever, working in a prison or a facility for the criminally insane. And he never met with any of the inmates. He just sat with their records and essentially meditated on them and did this traditional Hawaiian prayer. And I hope that I'm not bastardizing it. You know, for anyone who is Hawaiian, I would love to have the education if I'm misrepresenting this. But in any case, he meditated and he did this prayer. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Forgive me for creating this circumstance, because we generate the world from within us. That's my addition, my little translation, but please forgive me. I love you. Being able to create the love and connection and acceptance. And then thank you, gratitude for the connection, for the ability to influence, to be received, you know. So when we look at shifting paradigms, as we shift into this paradigm of unity, of connection, from the place of separation, moving from separation and recognizing our connectedness and our interconnectedness, by necessity, the world must change. We cannot, the world that we exist in this moment is founded in separation and consequently opposition and competition. And when we move into oneness, we move from competition into collaboration. And there, it's a very, very different space. And I recognize, and I invite all of us to, that I recognize that the movement from separation to oneness is something that we can bring our conscious awareness to and our conscious intention, and thereby we can make a difference. And Dido, thank you. Elaine says, blissful blessings, beautiful and lovely ones. That's awesome. And Dido says, by necessity, the world must change now. Exactly, exactly. This is urgent. And we are the harbingers and the elements of change. Dennis, you're so welcome. So much love. I'm going to wrap it up. So we get to change it. And the way we get to change it is first by changing our own consciousness and awareness. So that's it for this morning. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page at 9 a.m. Eastern. So please check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network. And I am so grateful for our time together. And I deeply appreciate the contribution that you are to me and my conscious awareness and being. So with lots and lots of love, until next time, I hope to see you again soon.